guys for coming. I want to say I'm really delighted by the fact that the authors were the last ones to sit down and stop talking. No, like seriously, writers, most of their work is done when nobody pays attention to them. And actually, because I know I am a writer, and I know that most writers don't have a reason to think about their audience that is incarcerated, I fully understand that when you pause to write a sentence, you don't think about what somebody on the other side of a prison cell is thinking about the words that you've written. And we're honored to be here at the New York Public Library to celebrate the second Inside Literary Prize. But we're also honored to be able to be here and be representatives of everybody who is not in this room. I would love to take credit for this. But what happened is a bunch of people reached out to me when they read an article in the New York Times and said, Dwayne, you should do this. And I scoffed because people like to tell me what to do. And if you know me, I usually do the opposite no matter what. And what happened was folks from the National Book Foundation, from the Center for Court Innovation, and Lori Feathers reached out and said, Dwayne, what about this idea? And it absolutely made zero sense that we would be able to pull this off. To organize a book prize judged by people who were serving time in prison. And before I go on and introduce the next person, before I say something about the people who we are honoring today, I want to say something about the people who judged this event. I told one of our earliest supporters that when Freedom Reads gets checks from people, we never question those checks. We don't ask if it was a mistake. We don't ask if the comma or decimal is in the right place. But we got a check from the state of Missouri for $1,000. And I got an email that said, Dwayne, what should we do about this? And I said, cash it. And I didn't understand the question, but the question was, wait a minute, this is a lot of money for somebody who works for 54 cents an hour. And if you've been in prison, you understand that sometimes your intentions don't arrive at the same time as your check. So when you send the money for your child's birthday, it arrives before the birthday card. And in this case, the money arrived before the letter. And the letter said, I will likely die here. And this process, this judging, this being a part of the Inside Literary Prize is the freest that I've ever felt in my life. And I'm giving you every red cent that I have. We're grateful to be here in the New York Public Library, but we are grateful because it allowed us to know that everybody who sits in a seat understands the significance of that decision. We are grateful because the second go-around, we know that the writers who are being honored, Astrid, who is not here, I heard somebody tell me that her book gave them the language to talk to their therapist about their trauma. We are here because I got to geek out about the figures of speech with Paul Harding. We are here because writers remember you wherever they met you. And Justin said, I knew you was going to be a good father years and years ago. Because his publisher said, you know what? We will make a freedom edition of your book. We believe that we trust you, that it might get censored, and that it matters that people read your book. So if it means not allowing them to see the mediocre nudity because the words matter more, we will do that. We will put our money up to make this happen. We are here because Nana, listen to me and Stephen. Grill him about his book because we read his book through the lens of people who have served time in prison. And we are here because the New York Public Library, I told a friend of mine, I said, you know, they don't let you check books out here. and they don't. But 5 minutes before closing, as I was reading the poem in Spanish to the Puerto Rican cat that worked at the guard joint, right? It was person after person after person trying to get into this place. Because literature matters. Because books matter. Because freedom begins with a book. And each of you who have chosen to come here on a Thursday night are honoring the fact that it's not just the words that matter, but it's the people who read the words that matter. Now, as you might have realized, I talk way too much. I was told to talk for 60 seconds at most. And you won't hear from me for quite some time. But who you will hear from are people introducing the authors of this great work. You will hear from people reflecting on why they wrote the work that they've written and reading passages from that work. You won't hear from the people who judged this work, but at the end of the night, when you hear my voice again, you will know that the hardest decision that more than 300 judges across 5 states in Puerto Rico made was choosing one. And I gotta tell you, before I walk off the stage, that I was in California last year, and this dude told me, I gotta tell you, Dwayne, I ain't like none of those books. But please, please, let me judge one more time. We're gonna watch a video, and then Stephen Parkhurst will come to the stage. We live in a world in which people tell you that prison is the end of something. And this was literally the first time that somebody told me that the thing that I do now started at the worst point of my life. I literally survived prison and built connections with other human beings because of the books that I was reading and that they were reading.
When I was on the inside, books saved me. Whether it's saved from the monotony of prison, from the depression or the despair of prison, these books are lifelines.
It is the ability to remove yourself from this place of angst and negativity and go way beyond the borders of these fences and the walls.
You learn so many things through books. You learn different perspectives.
I think books, especially while you're incarcerated, are ways to branch out and experience things you may not have experienced even when you weren't incarcerated.
It makes me remember that there is so much more. It gives me hope and motivation.
There's never been a prize where you acknowledge that some of the most dopest readers in this country, some of the people who find literature to be their lifeblood, some of the people who recognize the books on a regular basis, change the way they see the world, the way they think about the world, are men, women, and children who are incarcerated. The Inside Literary Prize is our bid to recognize those readers. We take the National Book Award finalists in fiction, and then we get 9 excellent readers. And those folks are inside and outside. They read that long list, and then they choose a short list, 4 books. Then we send those 4 books to 25 readers at each of the men's prison and the women's prison.
We're here today at the Edna facility in New Jersey. We're here to judge these 4 amazing titles for the 2025 Inside Literary Prize. Walked into that gym and the energy was amazing. These are the most well-read people in America. You know, once you get going, it's hard to shut it off. Like, we want to stay forever.
These words, because I write them to it, I just love it.
Everyone loves Chingay because it is our story.
We get the conversations that show that like minds are broadening, that people are thinking about things differently.
This is a book that not only does this generation live, generations after this generation. It's because if I had dealt with my trauma as it was happening, I wouldn't be physically like in this building in these vacuums.
You can tell sometimes when the incarcerated population shows up to be part of something, and you can tell when someone shows up to really engage and be an active part of the process. And I think if you had sat with them for another 5 hours, that would have been okay.
Books taught me to humble myself, reminding me that the playing field of wisdom, of intelligence, of curiosity, and of what makes you interesting knocks down all of the walls of prejudice that keep us becoming who we imagine ourselves capable of being.
Our voices are rarely heard while we're inside. They can know that we were the ones who judged these and we had the voice and impact to make that decision.
Being a judge for this prize means that for this moment, in this moment, I'm not just an incarcerated person, I'm a reader, and that what I do is of value, and that my time had meaning.
"7 days short of 30 years in prison from the age of 17 to 47. And I never thought that I'd be standing in front of thousands and thousands of people like this. Talking about a book written about prison. And, all that time on the inside taught me one thing. But it didn't teach me about Zoom. Because had it taught me about Zoom, I would have known that the face on the screen does not really indicate how big or small somebody is on there. And I sure as hell would not have gotten spicy with this dude who's like 6'2". I would not have done that. Dwayne, you should have warned me that this is a big cat. Before I introduce Nana, it's an honor. It's an honor to stand before all of y'all and to go into all 15 prisons. Who does that after serving 30 years, right? To go back to the inside, over 60 prisons now with Freedom Reads, with this work that we do. And people on the inside expect the wisdom and the truth from somebody like me when we go inside. And the thing that I wanted to hear that I didn't believe from anybody else except somebody that's been in my shoes was that people gave a shit out there. So when we come inside and we say, yo, these authors, they know you're judging their book, bro. They know that you're locked up. And they're humbled and they're honored by that. So to be able to go into 15 prisons and 300 folks that are judging this award and to be able to share that truth with them is, man, I'm re-raising myself from my years on the inside every time I do that. So with that said, I'm old and I can't see. This guy, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, thank God he told me how to pronounce that, was raised in Spring Valley, New York, and now lives in the Bronx. His debut collection, Friday Black, won the Penn Jean Stein Book Award, and his first novel, Chain Gang All-Stars, was a finalist for the National Book Award for Fiction. He is nominated tonight for the same novel. As Inside Literary Prize judge Joey Stridges from Cheshire out here in Connecticut Correctional Institution put it, these are wild, man. We get a lot of wild quotes from folks on the inside talking about these books. Chain Gang All-Stars critiques the carceral system, materialism, and the commodification of human suffering, exploring themes of redemption, love, and resistance against dehumanizing systems. The narrative highlights strength and resilience in the face of systemic oppression. This story is deeply rooted in the historical context that shaped the characters' experiences and demonstrates how history continues to influence and affect individuals and communities. Despite facing the systemic challenges, the characters found strength in community and solidarity. Chain Gang All-Stars is a must-read, exclamation point. So with that said, I want to introduce this guy, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. Thank you all.
Quick note, I'm actually 6'3"-ish, so. I can confirm I did get pressed a little bit, and I welcomed it. If you write work like this, you hope more than anything that those who are directly implicated by its subject matter might see that you represent it in a way that felt honest or true. And I tried my best. So just being nominated for this award, genuinely, I can't think of a greater honor for this particular book. So to the center, to the foundation, to Freedom Reads, you've really done me a great honor. Thank you. I'm going to read a small section that I haven't read before. It's kind of terrifying, but I don't know why I chose to do that. But one of the characters in this book, the protagonist, her name is Loretta Thurwar, and in this section she reflects on a sort of action, a sort of movement action she and some other members, other people who were on the inside participated in. When they asked her what she was most proud of, she always thought of hunger. She'd helped to organize it, the hunger strike, when she was still inside. She'd stopped eating, stopped working her busy work because conditions in her own prison were beneath human decency and beneath human dignity. And she'd gone on strike not just for those around her, but for those in other prisons like hers. There were so many. And those in the immigration detention camps too, who were being held for no crime at all, except trying to live. Prisons have a way of speaking to each other. And when they learned about the horrors elsewhere, they took action. She'd written a draft of her statement and slipped it on a piece of paper to a reporter who had taken interest in the lives of the women. And then there's a letter. To all with a conscience and sense of justice. We, on the inside of the geode system facility known as Forthright Detention Center, stand imprisoned but in power and solidarity with those imprisoned at the center located at New Holly, and we reject the separation of families and the inhumane violence set against innocent refugees. We reject the notion that so-called aliens, because of their non-citizenship, must be subject to inhumane conditions in poorly organized detention centers. We fully condemn the rape and sexual assault that is and has been prevalent in these facilities, as well as the trading and bartering of children into any number of horrors. There's a footnote I'll get to at the end of this. We demand that these so-called immigration detention centers be abolished and ask for a more humane method of accepting those in need into our country. We demand an end to the neo-slavery and geode systems and all American detention institutions, which have long kept the harsh flame of slavery alive in this country. We find abhorrent the ease with which humans subject other humans to torture in the name of righteousness and justice. And we are ready to put our lives on the line to ensure our demands are met. Signed. And the footnote is, about 14,700 complaints alleging sexual and physical abuse were lodged against Immigration and Customs Enforcement, popularly known as ICE, between 2010 and 2016, which is thousands and thousands. ICE was created in 2003 as part of the government's response to the September 11th attacks. Thank you, guys.
Bring this down quite a lot. Good evening. My name is Lori Feathers, and I'm so happy that you're all here this evening. It really is a joy to be gathered here in celebration of the second annual Inside Literary Prize. This moment and this prize I feel, is hope-giving, and perhaps you'll feel the same way. I want to thank the organizations and the people that co-founded the prize with me, the indomitable teams at Freedom Reads, the Center for Justice Innovation, and the National Book Foundation. All tireless defenders of the human right for everyone locked behind walls to have access to the ideas, experiences, and emotions that dwell between the pages of a book. On June 12th, I had the privilege to visit the York Correctional Facility for women in Niantic, Connecticut. We spent a few hours in a roundtable discussion talking with the judges, about 20 women. Their reactions to the 4 books under consideration were thoughtful and deeply felt. In a lot of ways, it was like the best book club that you could attend. Many of the women shared how certain parts of the books spoke to them and their own life experiences. I met Andrea, or Andy as she's called, who mentors new arrivals and works in a shop on site that repairs Braille typewriters. Also Chaz and Curtis, and each of them told me that they were using their time behind bars to try to figure things out, their purpose in this life, and that the books helped them reflect on their past and determine what they wanted for their futures. One of the 4 books we discussed is This Other Eden by Paul Harding, who I have the honor of introducing tonight. Paul is director of the MFA program in Creative Writing and Literature at Stony Brook University. He won the Pulitzer Prize for his novel Tinkers and is the author of another novel, Enon, and of course, This Other Eden, which was a finalist for the National Book Award for Fiction. Monica Mogg, an Inside Literary Prize judge at the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey, said about This Other Eden, quote, "This book was one of the most profoundly experienced and immersive stories I have recently read. Every word or sentence or paragraph filled me with emotion, thought, and reverence for humanity. It was a journey of deep reflection and reminded me of all that life, family, and love have to do with our very survival, determination, and happiness. As in Harding's words, this other Eden felt like a tectonic force," end quote. And now I'd like to ask Paul to come to the stage.
So whenever I have to talk about something that's as important and dear and inspiring and humbling as this, I can never do a final draft because I will think something different by the time I read it and start arguing with myself, so I come up with a bunch of confetti like this, and we'll just see where I'm at here. It's such an honor and a privilege and a great joy to be here. One of the things I've just been thinking about, I've done book clubs in prisons, not extensively, but several times. One of the things that taught me that I've brought into the classroom with my own students is to always urge my students to not be self-conscious about trying to write the best, most honest books they can, because you never know what your book might mean to somebody in circumstances you might never be able to anticipate, and to not be self-conscious, but to be self-aware about that. Because in certain circumstances, like somebody who's incarcerated, a minute lost reading something that's fraudulent or unserious or disrespectful to the reader's intelligence and dignity is a minute they've lost. So you can't strike any false notes. You have to work to ask who's going to be reading my book, when will they be reading it, where might they be reading it? You know, can it stand up to any circumstances that you can imagine or maybe can't imagine? So to me, I try to make my books so that anyone reading them anywhere, at any time, in any circumstances, will feel respected, by them, will feel the effort to connect with the reader in ways that are not colonizing, not coercive, fully courteous and accommodating to their experience, their ways of understanding themselves within the world. I try to make my books gracious and generous to the reader in a way such that they will be engaged and received in fellowship. And I think of, when I'm working on a book, that I'm trying to create something that when it is put in the hands of anybody, anywhere, that it will be taken as a gesture and a token of recognition between friends. So, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to move it up a tiny bit. I'm Courtney Bryan, the CEO of the Center for Justice Innovation. And Paul, when you said the word fellowship, it really, that word speaks to me being in this room today, thinking about the fellowship that's created across, through this project, across organizations, people, institutions, incarcerated people, and people who are who work behind bars as well. For the past 3 decades, my organization, the Center for Justice Innovation, formerly the Center for Court Innovation, has worked with courts and communities around the country to help deliver safety and justice, an approach that we call community justice. We are so honored to be part of the Inside Literary Prize because it speaks to a fundamental belief that the work of justice reform, of truly creating safety and justice, is really about seeing and fostering our essential humanity. And art and literature are an expression of that essential humanity. Over the years, we have found that the arts are a particularly powerful tool of community justice. The arts and literature open minds and hearts. The arts connect us across vast divides, and the arts really, truly help us to see one another. Astrid Romer's wonderful book on a woman's madness does exactly that, connecting us across cultures to our shared humanity. I'd like to read to you a reflection on Astrid's book from Niraj Patel, who was an Inside Literary Prize judge at Cheshire Correctional Institution in Connecticut. She says, "This book explores many topics that the world can relate to, from gender and identity to culture and relationships, trauma and healing. Many people in both society and behind the wall are constantly searching for their own identity, as well as for acceptance from society or from within. This book encapsulates what it is to be a woman navigating the madness of a world that often refuses to see you. This is one book that should be read by the masses." Though Astrid was unable to attend tonight's ceremony, she was kind enough to send a message along for us, and I'd like to introduce her friend and colleague, Karen Gu, who's here to tell us a little bit more about Astrid and to introduce her message. Karen.
Thank you, Courtney, and thanks everyone for being here. In 1966, at the age of 19, Astrid Romer emigrated from Suriname to the Netherlands. She identifies herself as a cosmopolitan writer. Exploring themes of race, gender, family, and identity, her poetic, unconventional prose stands in the tradition of authors such as Toni Morrison and Alice Walker. She was awarded the P.C. Hooft Award in 2016 and the Dutch Literature Prize in 2021. On a Woman's Madness, her English language debut in Lucy Scott's translation, was shortlisted for the 2023 National Book Award for Translated Literature and longlisted for the 2025 International Booker Prize. Her novel, Dealer's Daughter, was nominated for the Boon Literature Prize, a prestigious literary award given annually to the best book originally written in Dutch. And now you'll hear from Astrid in these recorded remarks. Thank you.
My novel belongs to people who could not or cannot stand or live with the systems that dehumanize them. Most people cope and find a way, but some persons just get mad. Some get extremely mad and even neglect the consequences of their resistance. My novel is about women trying to find some happiness in their lifetime. And I am so inspired knowing you hear me through my fiction. And I thank you very much for that.
Good evening, y'all. What a gift it is to gather tonight and for the celebration. I'm Ruth Dickey, and it's my pleasure to serve as the Executive Director of the National Book Foundation. Our tremendous thanks to the wonderful people and partners at Freedom Reads, the Center for Justice Innovation, and Lori Feathers, who both conceived of and make this collaboration possible. The National Book Awards will celebrate our 76th anniversary this November, and tonight, what a pleasure it is to celebrate the second anniversary of the Inside Literary Prize with all of you. When we say that it is our goal to reach readers everywhere, we mean it. We distribute free books and present free author programming in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, from public housing communities to public libraries. It's been our tremendous good luck to get to build our work reaching the exceptional readers inside of prisons alongside our friend and co-conspirator, Dwayne Betts, since 2018, from Literature for Justice to book circles to now with the Inside Literary Prize. Dwayne, thank you for your leadership, and thank you to the many, many beating hearts who make this work possible. Allie, David, Leroy, Lori, Madeline, Stephen, Tyler, Catriona, Dan, Michaela, Ale, Beowulf, Natalie, and it takes a Freedom Reads, CJI, and Team Book Village to make this all happen. Most of all, thank you to our judges, near and far, for your care and insight. What a gift it is to be able to connect National Book Award honored titles and authors with you, some of the most astute and thoughtful readers across the country. It's a special honor to celebrate the work of tonight's shortlisted authors and translators, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, Paul Hardin, Astrid Romer, Lucy Scott, and Justin Torres. Without further ado, I have the gift of introducing our final shortlisted author for this evening's program, Justin Torres. Justin is the author of Blackouts, winner of the 2023 National Book Award for Fiction and the California Book Award. His first novel, We the Animals, was a national bestseller and adapted into a feature film. When explaining why she voted for Blackouts to be selected for the 2025 Inside Literary Prize, Amy Lou Daniel, a judge inside Central California Women's Facility, wrote, Blackouts raptured my attention. I enjoy real, true stories. I think that other people need to read this book to consider queer individuals' history deliberately being blacked out, and how we can all relate to the characters of the book with regard to trying to find our own identity. There was a lot of power in the telling of this story. This book challenges the reader to consider how history is written and rewritten or retold, and how much is left out to fit social norms. Marginalized communities such as these need to be seen. Thank you, Amy Lou, for those words, and please join me in welcoming Justin to the stage.
Hi, guys. I have some prepared remarks, but because Dwayne referenced when we first met, I'm just going to tell a little story. We met 17 or 18 years ago in Vermont, of all places, at this kind of like summer writers camp for, Bread Loaf, maybe you know it. And we were sitting on a bench in a field, like under all these stars in Vermont. And just kind of like we were like in our late 20s, we just kind of dove in and just like talking about everything, about where we were from and our hopes for the future. And Dwayne was about to become a father. And I also knew that he was about to become a superstar. Like, it was so evident. You just meet some people and you're just like, it's all gonna happen for you. Like, I just know it. But he was really anxious about becoming a father. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're so literary. You're so kind and you're so dedicated to social justice. Like, do you want to be my father? Anyway, that's my memory. That's my memory of Dwayne. Anyway, my prepared remarks. Okay, so Blackouts, my novel, is a deathbed vigil. Just the two main characters confined to a single room, having a long conversation. Juan is old and dying. The narrator, whom Juan calls Nene, is much younger, in his late 20s. The two first met a decade prior in a mental institution where Juan was a patient, and Nene had been institutionalized against his will. Juan sensed how debased Nene was feeling by his confinement, and through patience and gentle conversation, he teases Nene out of his own sense of both stigma and shame, and introduces Nene to queer literature and connects him with a grand cultural history. In many ways, despite their confinement, he frees Nene. This structure of a long conversation between two men in a single room was inspired by Manuel Puig's Kiss of the Spider Woman, which is set in an Argentine prison where two men have been confined to share a cell, one for being queer and another for being a revolutionary. That book, like my book, is about being both politicized and tenderized through the storytelling and shared intimacy. And this is all just to say that this moment is immensely moving for me. The fact that my book, which is about resisting erasure and the relationship between freedom and literature, has been named a finalist for this prize, and that it's been judged by judges inside. I'm just incredibly grateful for their careful consideration. A lot of the stories Juan tells Nene in that room are about queer history, about people whose sexuality was sanctioned, denied, forbidden public expression, about the historical pathologization, policing, and punishment of sexual transgression. Queer history is a history of stigma and violence and erasure, but also a history of creative responses, the myriad ways queer people found to express and enjoy their sexualities despite suppression. The two main characters in Blackouts are queer and Puerto Rican, and there's a third major character, a real-life historical figure named Jan Gay, who was this kind of out and proud lesbian in the 1920s. And I don't need to tell you all that these populations are overrepresented in prisons, right? Puerto Ricans, Latinos, queer people, especially queer women. And because the book is so much interested in history, it functions something like an archive. It has all of these images, these real-life archival nude images. Some of them are taken from scientific studies based in kind of eugenicist thinking. They used to measure people's bodies, especially their genitals, to kind of find the source of homosexuality. But a lot of the images are more celebratory. They're erotic. They're nudes taken of queer people by queer people. Dwayne called them mediocre, but we'll let that go. Anyway, all of these archival images had to be redacted before the novel could go inside the prisons. And I'm enormously grateful to my editor and my publishing house who recognized the importance of this prize and did not flinch at the costs and logistical hurdles of publishing a special redacted edition of the book on very short notice. And of course, there's enormous irony in the fact that a book about blackouts would need to be blacked out. That a book about queer sexual expression, which has been so often redacted from official records and confined to narratives of pathology and criminality, would itself be redacted. But beyond that irony, The act of institutionally mandated redaction points to the enormous kinship between the queer past and contemporary prison culture, where almost every form of sexual expression, whether homosexual, heterosexual, or otherwise, is officially denied. Of course, back in the queer past and in contemporary prisons today, people find creative solutions in the face of censure. People find sex, intimacy, romance, eroticism, love. But it's good for those of us on the outside dedicated to sexual liberation, which I'm sure we all are, to remember this kinship and to advocate for sexual dignity wherever it is suppressed. Thanks.
Perfect. So I'm Allie. I'm with Freedom Reads, and I know that everyone is definitely excited and eager for the announcement of the winner, but you have to hear from me first and a few other very important people. So I was part of the team of 3 people that were there for every discussion, the other 2 being Stephen Parkhurst and David Perez de Hoyos. And I'm on the fundraising team, but I'm very grateful that Dwayne and Freedom Reads really gave me their blessing when I was like, I want to be on every stop of this 2025 Inside Literary Prize Tour. And I wanted to do that for a lot of different reasons, but at heart, I'm a bookworm, and I wanted to be in conversation with other book lovers. And it, as I thought about my remarks for tonight, I really wanted to paint as much of a picture as I could of what that experience was like from the perspective of our team a bit. And, I think it's hard to understate. Going to 15 prisons in 6 weeks is very difficult work, but we woke up for a discussion day, eager to be there and to have the honor of being there with the judges as they deliberated over their decisions. And those decisions were, I would say, they were very well thought out and hard won. There was a lot of back and forth, and it wasn't an easy decision in any of the conversations that I was had the honor of sitting in on. It was incredible to see people build community over books, and at some points really challenging themselves, because there were instances where people weren't actually as open to the books for one reason or another. And in the weeks leading up to discussion day, we had follow-up meetings where we talked about that, let's talk about this resistance here, But I think that something that I really wanted to point out too was that the judges for the prize also faced unique challenges in the reading environment. People assume that folks in prison have all the time in the world to read, but people have restrictive work schedules. Either they work a night shift, that means odd hours for reading, and that interacts weirdly with the day, or heavy education course loads, distractions with noise, that sort of thing. And yet the folks that judge this literary prize are the most committed and the most voracious readers that I've ever had the pleasure of chatting books with. So it was an honor of a lifetime to be there for all those conversations. And I think one thing that I really want to highlight about this year's prize is it was truly boundary breaking. We went to Puerto Rico as one of our stops, and that happened because of my colleague, David Perez de Hoyos, who, as put everything into making that happen. And one of the judges I met there, Juan Ayala, one of the best things that he did was he challenged us. When we went there, he told us straight up, like, I'm not gonna engage with you guys in English. I'm going to only engage with you all in Spanish. And we were like, all right, that's great. We love that. And that whole conversation with the judges in Puerto Rico was just a beautiful mix of Spanglish that is just, iconic of the Puerto Rican diaspora. And we had some of the most in-depth conversations, and there was a lot of unique perspective that the Puerto Rican judges in particular gave to the books. And so ultimately, the whole tour was full of surprises. The insights were incredible. And I'm very excited for us to hear about the winner later on. But I think the thing that Juan really made me want to do was to give some Spanish language remarks because that matters. So yeah, I know we're recording this, so para Juan, gracias por decirnos directamente que no ibas a hablar con nosotros en la lengua de inglés del colonizador. Entiendo tus sentimientos y fue un gran honor estar en ese cuarto con tú y tus otros compañeros hablando sobre los libros en la manera de cual hablamos sobre esos libros. Fue una profunda discusión y fue un gran honor estar allí con ustedes. Y para la población en prisión hispanohablante, el proyecto ese año de ese premio literario empujó, de veras nos empujó a ser mejor y a tratar de incluir más del idioma en español, que creo que es algo muy importante que no siempre el mundo se acuerda, pero nosotros nos acordamos y vamos a seguir acordándonos de eso, de la importancia de eso. So we're almost wrapped up with my remarks, but you also need to hear from the judges. And, I want to introduce Lindy Felsher, who is a 2024 Inside Literary Prize judge who has flown all the way from Colorado to join us tonight and share more about what the experience of being a judge last year meant to her. So please help me welcome Lindy to the stage.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Allie. So my name's Lindy. Tonight I stand here honored, I'm grateful, and I'm deeply moved. Not so long ago, within the walls of prison, loneliness was my constant companion. Isolation had become my reality, and hope was a distant memory. Each day felt heavier than the day before, until one day, a simple sign-up sheet came my way. That sheet invited me to become a judge in the Freedom Reads Inside Literary Prize. What became as a task quickly transformed into a lifeline. I dove into those books, and suddenly I was no longer confined. Each page transported me beyond the bars, beyond the harshness of prison life. Reading became my escape, my comfort, and my salvation. But more than that, reading brought me something unexpected. It brought me community. For the first time in too long, I connected with women who shared my passion. We laughed, we debated, and we bonded over stories that made our hearts beat with purpose for the first time in a long time. Together, through literature, we found strength and unity in one of the most unlikely places. When I chose Imani Perry's South to America as my pick, I felt a resonance deep in my soul. It spoke truth, it sparked powerful conversations, and ultimately became the winner. Witnessing this incredible work touch so many lives really affirmed my own journey, showing me the profound words that have on healing, uplifting, and transforming people. Freedom Reads didn't just give me books, it gave me hope, belonging, and it gave me dignity. It reminded me, even in the darkest of times, of my own humanity. Tonight, I stand here free, not just from physical confines, but from the isolation that once defined me. Literature gave that to me again, and to all who make Freedom Reads possible, from the bottom and the depths of my heart, thank you.
Each one of the books had their own sort of life, but, you know, the characters were all marginalized, right, throughout all 4 books. And I think the women in there really brought their own stories to connect with these characters.
Picking one book is very difficult because each of the books are very unique. So it's hard to pick. It's like choosing between a pineapple, an apple, and a jackfruit. These are wonderful as it is.
I will definitely hope that The Other Eden wins. That's the book that I chose. That's my favorite book because of the colonialism, and then it teaches you about the people specifically. It gives you the humanity in people. It shows you the struggle that people go through and the lack of power that we have when we're oppressed by those in power.
The toss-up was between Of a Woman's Madness and Chain Gang All-Stars. The South Indian woman in me, from a culture that is predominantly patriarchal, felt the madness of the author in her experience in Suriname, which is almost similar to women in Asia and Middle East go through.
That book touched every aspect of my personality. I suffer from mental illness, and I've suffered a lot from emotional trauma. And that book helped me peel back like layers to my onions that I hadn't tackled.
As an incarcerated female, Chain Gang All-Stars takes the win because there is a pressing need, especially in the criminal justice world, reform world, a pressing need to see the humanity that does exist in us incarcerated people.
Blackout, throughout the novel, you're thinking that the relationship is one way. By the end, you figure out is the relationship is solely with Juan and him trying to understand who he is as a person and to relate to his partner. But his partner is himself, and his partner is society, and his partner is his own sexuality and his duality. It's just like, and it's what we do as a society and as individuals trying to fit into molds to get accepted.
Anytime I talk to somebody about this work and about the Inside Literary Prize, it is literally always surprise. They are astonished that readers are so astute, but the people who are the most surprised, right, the people who pay attention to readers are the writers of those books, because they find themselves recognizing that it is an audience for their work that it didn't know existed. See, the thing is, I didn't have prepared remarks. I misspoke when I said mediocre. But also, to be perfectly honest, I said mediocre nudity. And it was kind of mediocre nudity. Like I was looking at the book and I was like, this is gonna be pornography. And I was like, nah, this ain't pornography, But the interesting thing, I have no familiarity with pornography at all, But the interesting thing actually is that, and I will say, a self-corrective is that, and I'm glad that you talked about what you talked about, Justin, is sometimes we mistake the most salacious of public portrayals of love as the bedrock of intimacy. And prison actually forecloses it all. And I think what's deeply meaningful about the notion of having an organization that acknowledges all of our efforts to bring literature into prison is it is an admission that literature really, truly is. The act of telling a story really, truly is the first intimacy that we experience. I mean, I remember talking to Mike about talking to his kid. He's talking about reading P is for pterodactyl to his kid who can't read or listen that well. She's teething, so, you know, she ain't really interested, you know. But the point is the intimacy of a story works both ways, and it's beautiful to be in a room like this with so many people who acknowledge that. And I gotta admit something that I don't want to admit publicly. Besides the fact that I've been weeping this whole time, I'll admit that because I've become comfortable with that, man. But this has been beautiful. I'm jealous, yo. I mean, I'm listening to them talk about y'all books, and I'm like, I wrote books too, you know? I'm like, what does it mean to like organize an organization to help be a part of this, and they never consider my books, ever. And then actually what it means is like the last year that my book wasn't considered for the National Book Award, I went on a public rant for 17 hours. And the next time I talked to the folks at the National Book Foundation, they was asking to collaborate with me. Which means to be taken seriously means that you can be taken seriously in all of your emotions. And so I want to thank two people here. I want to thank Alex and I want to thank Julie, because to do this work, it requires people to see you as who you are. And not who you have been, and not who you were yesterday, but to see you deeply as who you are. I listened to this woman talk about the profound experience of dealing with mental illness and not being seen. And I think about how we have all struggled with not being seen. And I did not know that the National Book Foundation's partnership with us, that the Center for Court Innovation's partnership with us, that Lori Feathers' partnership with us would allow us to allow people to be seen. And that is like really deeply meaningful. And as I announced the winner, I want to say that I too have won. Early on, they said that it's going to be an award announced for whoever has the most rings on. I'm just saying, I won. But I too have won because I have the privilege every day of being a part of something that I know is deeply and instinctively bigger than me. I didn't go to most of those prisons. It was Stephen, it was Tyler, it was Kevin, it was Darlene, it was Taryn. It was people who didn't go, but made sure that the mail was checked when we were away. It was people who organized the flights. That's Nikki. It was Lori. It was Jimmy. And yo, I gotta tell you, working with more than 4 people is not always easy. And so it was a lot of, yo, we are here because this matters, and let's figure out how to be happy tomorrow. And it was a lot of, damn, yo, yesterday wasn't that great, but we was happy for that 3 hours. And it was a lot of, you know what? Out of anything that I could be doing in this life, this is the most meaningful thing that I'm doing. We build libraries in prison. And I want to remind everybody in this room that we all have some moment in our lives where we have an idea where people say it makes 0 sense. And then we meet a Shannon and a Dan that says, yo, I can help you make it happen. We meet a Crystal who surprises everybody by reading This Life. It's like 700 pages long, you know, and saying this is my favorite book. I know I missed a bunch of names. I didn't name my sons. But, you know, part of what it means for me to be a writer is to discover what it means to be a father. Now, I am so reluctant to announce the winner because that suggests that it's 3 people who did not win. But that would be a lie. The reality is that we all won by the books that you all have written. And I am actually delighted in saying that the people in prison chose this book because they chose this book for reasons I would not have imagined. The winner of this year's Inside Literary Prize is Nana. I'm not going to try to say his whole name. But Chain Gang All-Stars. And as I invite him to the stage, the coda to his winning, I will say this. He was bragging about how he had went into this prison in Mississippi and how it was deeply meaningful to me, right? And then I went to Mississippi, and I'm kicking it with these folks. And he was like, yo, Nana came, and everybody loved it. It was amazing. And I pulled up my cell phone, and it was like, see, there Dwayne go again, not listening. And I called Nana and put him on speaker. And they talked about how much the people inside loved interacting with him, how much they loved the book. And I heard his voice, man. And the thing that you can't fake is caring about how people care about you. So thank you for that. And please come and say a few words before I close this out.
Whew, sheesh. Thank you. Again, thank you to the foundation. Thank you to the center. Thank you to everyone involved in organizing this. A huge thank you to all the judges. Even just watching those couple seconds, the times I've gone inside, this thing that we're trying to do has been completely reaffirmed. And the world is worlding right now, for real. And it's easy to get pretty cynical, but y'all have given me something today. A while ago, I wrote an essay because I kept getting asked, why do I write so-called political stories? And part of what I said was this. I'm interested in the ways we dehumanize each other. I'm interested in our capacity for good despite the insidious hatred and fear all around us. All my stories have been tough to write, and yet in that space of difficulty and fear, I found necessity and purpose. I wrote Chain Gang All-Stars hoping I believed in its aspirations. In doing the research it required, in engaging with the work and learning from those who have lived inside, I grew into a vehement belief in abolition and its principles. What I'm saying is, now, I deeply believe that we can build life-affirming institutions. I believe we can hold each other with far more grace, far more love, far more care. In writing a work that thinks about these things, I feel I am moving in and with purpose. Those of us who use language have a great power to both see and to shape, to understand and to give form, to assign meaning or obscure it. It's a great power, and with great power comes significant obligation. Leaving that aside, because it is through language that the courts can allow and direct a great violence to sweep across the country, as is the case right now, targeting those who have immigrated here like my parents did. It is through language that we might reduce humans with labels like criminal, so we might be more comfortable being careless in how we treat them. It is through language that genocide, like the one happening right now in Palestine, might become a defensive initiative or even a peace or some other obscuring euphemism. Recently, in speaking about the massive cuts to U.S. aid, Marco Rubio, who is somehow our Secretary of State, said the following. The 5,200 contracts that are now canceled spent tens of billions of dollars in ways that did not serve, and in some cases even harmed, the core national interests of the United States. It is reported by NPR and several other news outlets that by 2030, these same cuts could lead to 14 million deaths to people who might have otherwise lived. Somebody who thinks closely about language, about meaning, might ask, what is our core national interest? And why does mass death always seem to serve it so well? I'm noting these various subjects because thinking about prison forces you to think about harm. Which harm do you accept? Which harm do you allow? What do you condone? Chain Gang All-Stars is a book about humans in a system that is forged in violence, a system that has chosen to strip humans of their humanity. It asks us to think closely about the various systems we have in place and consider when we grew comfortable with its violence. When did we learn to sit comfortably with murder? When did we forget the smell of blood? I am so grateful to be a writer, and I feel honored to be a part of a particular tradition of this craft that thinks about this. To me, to be a writer is to understand language and its power and wield it with purpose. To delight the reader, yes, but also to acknowledge the harms that are rampant and unchecked, and ask questions that might bring us to a greater truth, that might grow us toward compassion. I am very lucky. For the last few years, I've had the chance to go inside carceral facilities in Arlington and Mississippi and here in New York, and I've been truly humbled by the wisdom and grace of the minds inside. Real grace. The kind that is earned through appreciation and understanding and hard, hard work. There is no question that this is the highest possible honor a book like this could ever receive, straight up. I take it to mean that those who judged believed I was not careless or callous, that I used language in a way that felt like truth. This retroactive mandate is a gift I can never repay, but one I will forever be grateful for. So with that, I want to thank the guys at Miss Premack's class in Shawa Gunk facility, and the men at Parchment Farms and Arlington Detention, and all those inside, those who judged and those who did not. This award is dedicated to y'all. Thank you, Marissa, for being here with me tonight. And again, thank you to all the organizers. I want to say shout out to my agent, Meredith Phil-Simonoff, and Naomi Gibbs, my editor, Josie Cowles, and Julianne Clancy, and Michiko Clark, and Lisa Lucas, and everyone at Pantheon. Much love to everyone at Blue Flower. I also want to thank anyone in the movement. This work is a hard work, but it must be done. I'd also like to thank my father, who was a criminal defense attorney when he was alive. This is the closest I'll ever be to being a lawyer. And so I think he would have liked this. Dr. Ruth Wilson Gilmore was a lighthouse to me through all this process. And if you ever see this, Dr. Gilmore, thank you. And as she said, where life is precious, life is precious. And the question I try to ask myself is, what if it were precious here? Thank you.
All right, so we almost done. Two quick things. The award is beautiful. It is made out of offcuts from the Freedom Library. The Freedom Library is a beautiful, handcrafted collection of bookcases that the books are housed on both sides. You can see it in the hallway. But this is made by our partners at J. Joiners, and it really is astonishing. All of the runner-ups, who aren't runner-ups but are co-winners and co-producers in this project of Making Literature Matter, are also beautiful, also made partly from offcuts, and also represent why we think this work matters. Now I gotta tell you, I wasn't able to go to Puerto Rico. Some things happened. All my fault. Didn't show up. And I thought that everybody who was Puerto Rican spoke Spanish. Slight mistake. And I said to myself, I am going to translate 20 of my poems into Spanish, and we're gonna show back up in Puerto Rico, and I'm gonna do a whole set in Spanish. There might be something absurd about that. The other night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up. I translated one of my poems into Spanish because, why not? I was walking into the library downstairs, and this dude was like, yo, I got to check your book bag. And I said, yo, are you Puerto Rican? He was like, that does not follow, but I am Puerto Rican. Now, I told you it was 5 minutes before they was going to get off of work, and I was like, yo, let me read you this poem. And he looked at me like, yo, bruh, for real? My girlfriend was on the phone. She was in my ear. I had on these really like fancy headphones that let me talk to people and talk to other people. I started reading him this poem. He said, damn, yo, you serious? I get upstairs, a little bit carried away. I'm in the green room. I asked his brother, yo, can I read you this poem? He said, sure. I ain't know he was a reader. He said, ho, what's that word? No, that is wrong. You got to change it to this. And then I thought, man, he helped me revise my poem before going on stage. That is dope. So I will end with this. I changed the title, and my book is called Burlesque. I changed it to Sin Vergüenza because I think we should all find ways to walk through this world without shame. And I thought it was cool to end this whole proceeding with a love poem written in Spanish or translated into Spanish that I am certainly going to brutalize. Sin Vergüenza, Encarnada, Carmine, Roja, Cardinal, tú eres una bella sonroja, tus manos desplegados sobre los cordones de mi panza, vino tinto, vino profundo, Boreos, esclerata, cubres mi boca con tus labios, en te respiro. Le susurras a esta piedra hasta que tiembla como dado sobre mis huesos. Tus uñas tocan mi rodillo. Tu lengua se reza para mi llamada de clarín. Antítesis de todos los ladrillos, de todas puertas de celdas. Roja quemada. Son rosada, rubicanda, rojiza, jaspe. Un susurro a decir tu nombre, granate, enrojecida, canela, cobre, nosotros. Thank you.